Rejected Omega is hated for being fat and curvy, but the ruthless Alpha King claimed her as his Luna. The village of Eldara had never been kind to Serenia. From the moment she had grown past the years of childhood, whispers had followed her wherever she went. Mothers tugged their daughters away when she passed, and children giggled cruelly as she walked through the marketplace. It was not just her size that drew their scorn, but the way her curves defied their narrow ideas of what an omega should be. Yet despite the relentless mockery, Serenia carried herself with a quiet grace, and there was a fire in her amber eyes that no words could extinguish. Each morning, she rose before the sun to help her aging father in the fields. The earth beneath her fingers was coarse and cold, but it gave her a sense of grounding. She thought of the stars at night, how vast and endless they were, and wondered if somewhere beyond the mountains there existed a place that would see her worth. Still, those dreams felt fragile. In Eldara, beauty was currency and Serenia was bankrupt. On that particular day, the village was buzzing with excitement. A royal procession was to pass through, and the entire town was summoned to line the main road. Rumors whispered that Kaelin, the Alpha King of the Northern Realm, would be present. The mere mention of his name sent shivers through Eldara. Kaelin was known as ruthless, merciless, and feared even by his own council. Stories told of the harsh punishments he had meted out to traitors, and yet there were whispers that he had unmatched intelligence and power, a wolf who ruled without question. Serenia had no desire to see him. Royals had never taken notice of her, and she expected nothing beyond the usual sneers and stares. But when she arrived at the cobblestone street, pushed forward by the bustling crowd, something shifted in the air. A hush fell over the villagers as a dark figure approached on a black steed, surrounded by armored guards whose eyes glimmered with unnatural light. Kaelin was taller than any man she had ever seen, his presence so commanding it seemed to warp the air around him. His dark hair fell across a sharp, chiseled face, and his eyes, gray and stormy, scanned the crowd with an intensity that made hearts falter. Serenia felt herself shrink back, yet something deeper stirred, a spark of curiosity or perhaps recognition that she could not name. She looked away quickly, feeling the familiar weight of shame settle in her chest. The villagers, however, could not contain their cruelty. "Look at her," one woman whispered. "Who would want an omega like that? She's too soft, too round. She's a disgrace to her kind." Children echoed the laughter of the adults, and a chorus of judgment washed over her like a cold wind. Serenia's fingers clenched into fists at her sides, but she said nothing. Words had never helped. The only thing she could do was keep walking, head lowered, hoping to disappear into the crowd. Kaelin, meanwhile, had dismounted silently, his guards forming a protective circle around him. His eyes scanned the villagers, noting their fear and reverence. But then they landed on Serenia. She was standing slightly apart, shoulders straight despite the jeers, eyes bright even in the shadow of humiliation. Something in her presence drew him in, a mixture of defiance and vulnerability, of hidden strength masked by the world's cruelty. For a moment he did nothing, and the villagers continued their mocking. But then, with deliberate steps, Kaelin moved closer, each stride deliberate and confident. The crowd instinctively parted, whispering and gasping as the Alpha King stopped directly in front of Serenia. The world seemed to narrow to that moment, the noise fading until only her heartbeat and the sound of Kaelin's measured breathing remained. "You," he said, his voice low, commanding and clear. "Step forward." Serenia's knees threatened to buckle. She had been seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in her life. Her cheeks burned, a mixture of fear and disbelief. She hesitated, then obeyed. Kaelin's gray eyes studied her, taking in her curves, her soft hands, the way her spine straightened despite the weight of the world's judgment. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, and his gaze pierced her as though searching for her soul. "Yes, your majesty," she whispered, barely audible. "Do you know what it means to be seen?" he asked again, softer this time, yet every word was heavy with power. Serenia could only shake her head. Kaelin reached out and lifted her chin with one gloved hand. "From this moment," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd like a sword, "you belong to me. You are my Luna." The words hung in the air, impossible and breathtaking. The villagers gasped, their whispers turning to stunned silence. A Luna was the chosen mate of an Alpha King, a position of honor and influence, but never had one chosen someone so unexpected. Some looked on in disbelief, others with envy. A few muttered curses under their breath, but none dared speak aloud. Serenia felt the world tilt, her breath caught in her throat. Fear, confusion, and an unfamiliar thrill coursed through her. She was being claimed, yet it felt more like recognition than ownership. Somehow, Kaelin had seen her in a way the world never had. I, she began, but Kaelin raised a hand, silencing her. "No words are needed," he said, and for the first time there was a hint of softness in his eyes. "You will come with me. You will be trained, protected, and seen for what you are. Do you understand?" Serenia nodded, trembling. Her life as she had known it had ended in an instant, replaced by something unknown, powerful, and terrifying. As the Alpha King turned, signaling for his guards to escort them both to his castle, the villagers parted, some with relief that they were spared the wrath of Kaelin, others with disbelief that an Omega like Serenia had been chosen. Whispered words followed her as they departed. "She will never survive. She is too weak. She does not belong." Yet, as the castle loomed over the horizon, its dark spires cutting against the pale sky, Serenia felt a flicker of something she had never felt before: hope. Perhaps strength was not only in beauty or power, but in the courage to be oneself. Kaelin said nothing during the journey, his eyes ever watchful, scanning the shadows of the road. Serenia noticed the quiet intensity, the way he measured every step, and the way the air seemed to respond to his presence. She realized that he was not just feared, he was respected by the very forces of nature itself. At the castle gates, a shadow moved, a figure cloaked in darkness, almost invisible. The hairs on the back of Serenia's neck stood on end. She wanted to step back, but Kaelin's presence was steady and unyielding. Before she could speak, the figure lunged, a blur of motion aimed at her. Kaelin moved faster than thought, intercepting the shadow with a roar that shook the stones. Magic, cold and sharp, crackled in the air, striking the figure back into the shadows from whence it came. The guards tightened their formation, eyes glowing in response to Kaelin's power. Serenia's heart raced. Who was that?" she whispered. Kaelin's gray eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. "Danger follows those claimed by the Alpha," he said, his voice a mixture of warning and promise. "You are mine, Serenia, and I will not let anything harm you." Despite the fear, a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, someone had declared her worthy, not in spite of who she was, but because of it. A strange and powerful bond had begun, one that would test them both, in ways neither could yet imagine. As the castle gates closed behind them, the wind whispered through the spires, carrying with it shadows that watched, waited, and whispered of the trials to come. Serenia shivered, not from cold, but from the knowledge that her life had changed forever. And in that moment, she understood that being seen could be both a gift and a curse. For in a kingdom ruled by strength and magic, the world would not let an Omega like her rise without a fight. And thus, the story of Serenia, the rejected Omega, and Kaelin, the ruthless Alpha King, began. The castle of Kaelin rose from the edge of the northern cliffs like a dark sentinel. Its spires pierced the clouds, and the stones seemed alive with a quiet, eternal power. As Serenia walked through the massive iron gates, flanked by Kaelin's guards, a mixture of awe and fear filled her. She had left the familiar cruelty of her village behind, but the castle's grandeur brought a new kind of uncertainty. Here, every whisper could carry a threat, and every glance could conceal danger. Kaelin walked beside her, tall and silent, his presence so commanding that even the shadows seemed to bow in his wake. Serenia struggled to meet his gray eyes, which seemed to see every tremor of her heartbeat, every flicker of doubt she tried to hide. She had always been invisible, judged for her shape and softness, but Kalen looked at her with something different, intense scrutiny, as if he were unraveling the threads of her very soul. "You will learn quickly," Kalen said at last, his voice low and deliberate. "This castle is not a place for hesitation. Strength is not only in your body, Serenia. It is in your mind, your will, and in the fire you carry inside. Do you understand?" "Yes, your majesty," Serenia whispered, though the weight of the words pressed heavily against her chest. "Good," he replied, a hint of approval in his tone. "Then do not fail me." The castle was larger than anything Serenia had ever imagined. Hallways twisted like living veins, walls adorned with tapestries depicting battles, alliances, and ancient curses. Guards and servants moved with quiet precision, all aware of the Alpha King's power. Every glance they cast at her was tinged with curiosity, judgment, or barely concealed disdain. Even here, the whispers of Eldara had followed her. Her first encounter with the court was not gentle. Noble alphas and omegas, many of whom had long sought Kalen's favor, eyed her with thinly veiled contempt. "Did he choose this, Omega?" a tall alpha murmured, smirking. "She does not look fit for the role." "Perhaps he has grown blind in his old age." Serenia's cheeks burned, but she kept her head high. She had survived ridicule all her life. She could survive this too. Kalen, standing behind her like a shadow, gave no warning, no defense, only a single cold glance that silenced the court. Even the most arrogant nobles dared not speak further. In the following days, Serenia's life became a whirlwind of adjustment. Kalen's court was a maze of protocol, power, and subtle traps. She had to learn quickly. She discovered that her body, the one everyone had mocked, held strength she had never realized. Carrying herself with dignity, moving with careful awareness, she began to feel a confidence growing inside her, like a fire once smothered, now sparked into life. Kalen did not make her journey easy. He expected obedience, precision, and intelligence, and he tested her relentlessly. At first, Serenia stumbled, fumbling in the formalities of court and etiquette, her nerves betraying her. Kalen's eyes were often cold, unyielding like ice carving into stone. But in his harshness there were lessons, and in those lessons Serenia found growth. One afternoon, Kalen led her to the courtyard, where the wind whipped sharply against their faces. He placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and commanding. "Your body is your armor, Serenia. Do not let anyone tell you it is anything less. Learn to carry it with the strength it deserves." Serenia looked at him, surprised. Beneath his harsh words was something different, a recognition, a respect for what she had endured. It made her pulse quicken, a strange warmth rising in her chest. She did not yet understand it, but she knew it was powerful. Training was not limited to court etiquette. Kalen had discovered early that Serenia possessed a rare ability, a subtle magic tied to her emotions. She could sense the feelings of those around her, detect whispers of deception, and even influence small changes in her environment. At first, she struggled to control it. Shadows of fear would make her power flicker unpredictably, and the nobles who already scorned her watched for every misstep. "You cannot hide behind doubt," Kalen said one evening as she tried to harness her magic in the training hall. His voice was calm but relentless. "Your power comes from who you are, not from who they say you should be. Accept yourself fully, and you will become unstoppable." The words struck her deeper than he could have known. For a lifetime, she had been told she was not enough. Now, here in the castle, with this Alpha King watching, guiding, and demanding, she began to feel a small, fierce pride. Perhaps she was enough. Perhaps she had always been. Yet life in the castle was far from safe. Rival nobles, jealous of her sudden elevation, plotted quietly. Shadows lingered in corridors, messages written in whispers, warnings left in hidden corners. Serenia learned quickly that in Kalen's world, even a single mistake could be deadly. She had to be clever, alert, and cautious. But she also began to notice the rare moments when Kalen's guard fell, when his gray eyes softened, when he allowed her a glimpse of the man behind the ruthless exterior. One night, Serenia wandered the castle gardens, unable to sleep. The moon cast silver light on the stone paths, and the scent of night-blooming flowers filled the air. She paused by a fountain, watching the water dance and ripple, reflecting her own uncertain face. Her thoughts were interrupted by a whisper, soft and dangerous. "Serenia." She spun around, heart hammering, but the garden was empty. The shadows seemed to shift, as if alive. The whispers came again, chilling her to the bone. A rival alpha had sent a dark warning, a curse meant to unsettle her, to remind her she was an outsider. Fear rose, but alongside it something stronger, determination. She would not be cowed, she would not be broken. At that moment Kalen appeared, silent as the night itself. "You felt it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do not be afraid. Those who would threaten you are weak. Your strength is greater than theirs." Serenia looked up at him, the moonlight catching the planes of his face. Despite his usual coldness, there was a steady reassurance in his presence that she had never known. Her pulse quickened, not with fear but with an unfamiliar, thrilling sense of being seen. He had chosen her, and though the shadows of doubt surrounded them, for the first time she felt that she had someone to stand with her. Days turned into weeks, and Serenia's training continued. She learned not only courtly manners but also the subtleties of influence, the whispers of politics, and the control of her growing power. She discovered that Kalen, for all his ruthlessness, was a patient teacher when it came to her growth. He tested her limits, yes, but he also guided her, sometimes with a rare flicker of warmth that left her breathless. Despite her progress, Serenia struggled with her own self-doubt. She had been rejected by the world her entire life. Could she truly belong here? Could she stand beside Kalen as an equal, as a Luna, without faltering? Her doubts were answered sooner than she expected. One night as she walked through the halls, a dark figure emerged from the shadows, a servant loyal to a rival alpha, intent on harming her. Serenia froze, panic rising. She felt the familiar surge of magic beneath her skin, but her control wavered. Before she could react fully, Kalen appeared, moving with impossible speed and precision. He intercepted the attack, his roar echoing through the halls, forcing the intruder back into the shadows. Serenia watched, heart pounding, as he stood over her protectively, gray eyes blazing with intensity. "You are mine," he said, voice low but lethal. "No one will harm you while I stand." Serenia's chest swelled with a strange mixture of relief, awe, and something deeper she did not yet understand. She was terrified, yes, but also exhilarated. For the first time in her life, she felt not only seen but defended, cherished even in the cold, dangerous world of alphas and politics. As Kalen led her back to the Luna chambers, the tension between them was electric. Neither spoke, yet the air was thick with unspoken understanding, shared danger, and a growing connection that neither could deny. Serenia realized that her life had changed irrevocably. She had been rejected, mocked, and underestimated, yet here, in the presence of the ruthless Alpha King, she had begun to rise. The castle walls seemed less imposing now, shadows less threatening, and the whispers of the court less powerful. Serenia understood, with a clarity that startled her, that strength was not about size, beauty, or perfection. It was about courage, heart, and the refusal to be diminished. And for the first time she dared to hope that perhaps, in the ruthless Alpha King's shadow, she could not only survive but thrive. Yet, as they entered the chambers, a chill ran down her spine. From the corner of her vision, a shadow shifted, unnatural and silent. Serenia knew, without understanding how, that the danger was far from over. The rival Alpha's plots were only beginning, and the curse whispered through the castle like a living thing. She turned to Kaelin, who met her gaze with unshakable intensity. "Whatever comes," he said, voice steady, "we face it together. Do you trust me?" Serenia nodded, her hand brushing against his. The contact was fleeting, but it sent a spark through her entire body, a promise and a challenge all at once. "Yes," she whispered. The moonlight fell across their figures, as the wind carried the distant whisper of shadows. Serenia knew, in the pit of her stomach, that her journey had only begun, and that the castle, for all its power and beauty, held dangers and secrets that would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. The castle had grown into a world of its own for Serenia. Every hall and corridor held whispers, every shadow hinted at secrets. But she had learned quickly. She moved with confidence now, her presence no longer shrinking under the eyes of others. Yet she felt the weight of her role with every step. Being the Luna of Kaelin, the ruthless Alpha King, was both a privilege and a challenge she had never imagined. Kaelin had not eased his demands. Each day brought new lessons, new trials, and new tests of her strength, both mental and magical. Her magic, subtle and tied to her emotions, was beginning to awaken fully. Serenia could sense the moods of those around her, the hidden intentions of the court, and even the faint traces of curses that lingered in corners of the castle. It was exhilarating and frightening all at once. "You must control it, Serenia," Kaelin said one morning, his gray eyes sharp as he watched her. "Your gift is powerful, but it is tied to your heart. Fear will weaken it. Anger will twist it. Only when you are calm and fully yourself will it serve you and us." Serenia nodded, gripping the folds of her training robes tightly. She had learned to take his words seriously, for he did not waste them. Kaelin was a harsh teacher, but there was truth in his coldness. In the mirror of his judgment, she could see her own strength reflected, though it was often difficult to accept. The court, however, remained a web of challenges. Rival nobles whispered behind her back, attempting to undermine her with lies and subtle insults. One day, a particularly sharp-tongued beta approached her during a feast. "Do you really think you belong here?" the noble sneered, circling her like a predator. "You are soft, weak. The king could have chosen anyone." Serenia's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. "The king chose me," she said quietly but firmly. "That is enough." The beta laughed lightly, but there was no malice that could reach her anymore. Kaelin's presence loomed behind her, and the subtle crackle of his power seemed to warn the court of the cost of underestimating her. For the first time, she realized that the world's judgments were less important than the ones that came from within, and from those who truly saw her. Despite her growing confidence, Serenia felt a strange tension with Kaelin. There were moments when he would watch her with a softness that made her heart flutter, and other times when his cold, commanding gaze reminded her of the distance she had yet to cross. Their relationship was a complex dance of trust, tension, and unspoken longing. She was his Luna, yet the emotional connection between them was growing in ways neither had fully acknowledged. One evening, Kaelin led her to the edge of the northern cliffs, where the wind roared like a living thing, and the moon reflected silver against the dark sea below. "Tonight," he said, "you will face the trial of the shadows." Serenia's pulse quickened. The trial was said to awaken the latent abilities of the Luna, testing her courage and control. She had heard stories many had failed, succumbing to fear or losing themselves in the shadows, their magic turning against them. Kaelin extended his hand. "You are ready," he said simply. "Do not doubt yourself." Serenia took a deep breath and stepped forward. The shadows rose around her like a tide, dark and whispering, filled with the echoes of doubt, fear, and anger. For a moment she froze, feeling the pull of the darkness against her heart. But then she remembered Kaelin's words. Her power was tied to who she was, not what the world said she should be. She focused on the fire inside her, the courage that had carried her through ridicule, danger, and uncertainty. A warmth bloomed in her chest, spreading outward. The shadows faltered, curling away from the light of her determination. Serenia raised her hands, letting her magic flow through her, shaping the darkness into tendrils of silver light that danced and twisted, obeying her will. When the trial ended, the wind died down, leaving only the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below. Kalen stood silently, watching her with an unreadable expression. Then, for the first time, he smiled faintly. "You have done well," he said. "Your power is strong. Your courage is stronger." Serenia felt a swell of pride, but also a strange tension she could not name. Her pulse was racing, her mind alive with the exhilaration of success, and yet her heart seemed to beat faster when Kalen's eyes met hers. She did not understand it fully, but she felt it deep inside, a connection growing between them, undeniable and intense. Yet peace was fleeting. Shadows of the rival Alpha, who had first sent warnings to the castle, grew stronger. Dark forces crept into the halls at night, targeting Serenia's magic, trying to corrupt the bond she shared with Kalen. The castle itself seemed to sense the threat, corridors growing colder, shadows twisting unnaturally, and whispers echoing through empty chambers. One night, as Serenia trained quietly in her chambers, she felt it, a presence, dark and unyielding, watching her from the corners of the room. Her heart raced, but she summoned her power, letting the warmth of her courage flow outward. The shadow hesitated, then lunged. Kalen appeared, moving faster than thought, intercepting the attack with the precision of a seasoned alpha. The shadow recoiled, a hiss escaping its form before retreating into the darkness. Serenia's chest heaved, adrenaline mingling with awe. "Kalen," she whispered, words catching in her throat. "You are safe," he said, standing close, his eyes stormy and intense. "But you must remain vigilant. They will not stop until they have tested every part of you." In the following days, Serenia felt a shift within herself. Her magic had grown stronger, more responsive, more controlled. She discovered she could not only sense emotions but influence them subtly, bending shadows to her will, protecting herself from unseen threats. And with each victory, her confidence blossomed, intertwining with the tension between her and Kalen. Their relationship deepened. There were moments when Kalen's harsh exterior softened, brief flashes of care and vulnerability that left Serenia breathless. He would watch her quietly in the training halls, offer a rare word of encouragement, or simply stand near her, letting his presence bolster her courage. Yet the distance remained, a tension neither dared fully confront, though it simmered beneath every glance, every brush of hands, every shared danger. The court, meanwhile, grew restless. Whispers of Serenia's growing power and influence circulated, breeding envy and suspicion. One day, a council meeting turned heated when a prominent noble challenged Kalen openly. "Your Luna," the noble said, voice sharp, "is not of the stature one expects. Can she truly guide, truly protect, truly lead?" Kalen's eyes darkened. "She is not yours to judge," he said, voice low but resonant, carrying the weight of command. "Serenia is mine, and she will rise to her potential, whether you approve or not." The noble faltered, caught in the intensity of Kalen's gaze. Serenia, standing beside him, felt a surge of pride and fear. The words were not for her alone. They were a declaration to the entire court. She belonged here. She mattered. Yet danger never rested. Shadows of a past betrayal, one Kalen had never spoken of, began to surface. A figure from his own history, long thought gone, emerged in the castle, seeking to undermine both him and Serenia. It was a threat unlike any before, filled with cunning, magic, and malice. One stormy night, as lightning tore across the sky, Serenia sensed the approach of this unseen enemy. Her magic pulsed with warning, tendrils of light flickering along her skin. She ran toward Kalen, who was preparing to confront the threat. But before she could reach him, a dark figure struck from the shadows, seizing her with a force that made her cry out. Kalen reacted instantly, fury blazing in his gray eyes. "Serenia!" he roared, his power surging, shaking the very stones of the castle. He struck with controlled precision, driving the attacker back. But the moment was fleeting. The figure had vanished, leaving only a whisper of warning and a lingering curse that Serenia could feel crawling along her skin. Breathless, trembling, and frightened, Serenia looked at Kalen. What is happening?" she whispered. Kalen's face was hard, but his eyes softened briefly as he touched her cheek. "They are testing you," he said, "testing us. This is only the beginning. But you are stronger than you know, Serenia, and I will not let anything take you from me." As they stood together in the storm-lit courtyard, the wind whipping around them, the connection between them deepened, unspoken and undeniable. Their bond was no longer only of Alpha and Luna, but of shared trust, courage, and the quiet longing neither dared speak. And yet, lurking in the shadows of the castle, the enemy waited. The rival Alpha's plots were growing bolder, more dangerous, and the ancient curse that had followed Serenia's claim was awakening, hinting at challenges far greater than either she or Kalen had faced before. The night was silent now, save for the pounding of Serenia's heart and the distant rumble of thunder. She knew, with a certainty that was both thrilling and terrifying, that the trials ahead would test every part of her courage, her power, her heart, and her bond with Kalen. The storm over the northern cliffs had passed, leaving the castle battered but standing. Rain slicked the stone walls, and the air carried the tang of salt from the sea below. Serenia stood at the balcony of her chambers, hands gripping the cold iron railing. Her mind raced with thoughts of the shadows that had returned, the betrayal of the rival Alpha, and the curses that still lingered. The castle no longer felt entirely safe, yet she felt a strange clarity. She had grown, she had survived, and her magic had strengthened. But now the ultimate test loomed, one that would challenge everything she had learned, everything she had become. Kalen approached silently, his gray eyes as steady and stormy as the sea below. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice calm but heavy with purpose. Serenia turned to him, meeting his gaze. "I think I am," she said, though a shiver of fear ran through her. "I know we must face this together." He nodded. "Then let us not waste time." The enemy awaited them in the shadowed heart of the castle, the rival Alpha who had orchestrated Serenia's trials and the ancient curses that haunted the halls. The corridors were dark, twisted with magic that sought to confuse and divide them. Shadows flickered along the walls, whispering threats and testing Serenia's resolve. Kalen moved with silent authority, every step precise, his presence commanding the very air. Serenia followed closely, her hands tingling with the pulse of her growing magic. The shadows tried to reach her, clawing at her mind and heart, but she met them with light, bending them to her will. Each flicker of fear or doubt became strength, and each whisper of malice became a tool she wielded with increasing confidence. The rival Alpha emerged at the castle's central hall, a figure cloaked in darkness, his eyes glinting with cunning and malice. "So this is the Omega King has claimed," he sneered, voice echoing through the hall. "I expected weakness, yet I see fire. How disappointing." Serenia stepped forward, feeling Kalen at her side, his presence steady and unyielding. "We are not weak," she said, voice steady, carrying more authority than she had known she possessed. "And you will not harm us." The enemy laughed, and shadows erupted from his cloak, twisting and surging toward them. Kalen moved first, striking with precision, his power shaking the hall. Serenia followed, letting her magic flow freely, intertwining with his, shaping the shadows into silver tendrils of light that struck back at their foe. Together, they moved as one, Alpha and Luna, each aware of the other's strength, each enhancing the other's power. The rival Alpha faltered, unable to withstand their combined force. Yet he was clever, retreating into the darkness with a whispered threat, leaving a lingering curse that Serenia felt crawling along her skin. Kalen turned to her, concern etched into his features. "The curse is strong," he said, "but you are stronger." Serenia drew in a deep breath, closing her eyes. She felt the warmth of her magic, the connection between her heart and Kaelin's presence, and the courage that had carried her from ridicule to this moment. The shadows recoiled as she focused, and her power flared, brighter and stronger than ever before. The curse dissolved under her light, retreating like smoke into the corners of the castle. When she opened her eyes, Kaelin was watching her, his expression unreadable yet full of something she recognized now: pride, admiration, and something deeper, something she had longed to feel. "You have done it," he said softly, reaching for her hand. "You have grown beyond what I could have imagined." Serenia felt a warmth rush through her chest, a mixture of relief and exhilaration. "We did it," she said, "together." Kaelin's gaze lingered on her, gray eyes softening in a way that few had ever seen. For a moment, the walls, the shadows, and the trials of the castle seemed to fall away, leaving only them. His hand brushed hers, tentative at first, then firm, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them through fire, fear, and magic. For Serenia, it was a revelation. She realized that her worth was not defined by the world's standards, nor by the scorn of the village she had left behind. Her curves, her softness, her very being had been strengths all along. Kaelin had seen it, embraced it, and together they had turned fear into power, doubt into courage. In the days that followed, peace returned to the castle, though vigilance remained. The rival Alpha's threat had been diminished, and the curses that haunted the halls were quelled, at least for now. Serenia continued her training, but now it was not only about survival or control. It was about mastery, about embracing her full potential as the Luna of Kaelin, and as a force in her own right. The court, witnessing her courage and growth, began to shift. Whispers of doubt about her suitability were replaced with respect and cautious admiration. Nobles who had once mocked her now sought her counsel, realizing that strength could take many forms, and that the Luna of the Alpha King was not to be underestimated. Kaelin, too, seemed to change. His ruthlessness remained, for the world demanded it, but his interactions with Serenia grew warmer, more open. They trained together, strategized together, and shared quiet moments in the moonlit gardens, where words were few but meaning flowed between them with a depth neither had anticipated. One night, Serenia and Kaelin stood at the highest tower of the castle, overlooking the sea. The wind tugged at their hair and the stars reflected in the dark waters below. For a moment they were silent, each lost in thought, yet profoundly aware of the other's presence. "You have become stronger than I ever imagined," Kaelin said, voice soft, almost tender. "Not just in power but in heart. You carry yourself with a courage that inspires even me." Serenia felt her chest swell, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I have learned from you," she whispered, "and from myself. I am no longer afraid to be who I am." Kaelin reached out, gently brushing the tear away. "You never had reason to be," he said. "You are extraordinary." In that quiet moment the world seemed to hold its breath. They did not need words to understand what had grown between them. The bond of Luna and Alpha, forged in trials, strengthened by magic, and deepened by trust and understanding. Serenia knew that for the first time in her life, she was truly seen, truly valued, and truly loved. Yet even in this moment of triumph, a subtle whisper of shadow lingered at the edge of the castle walls. The ancient forces that had watched, tested, and challenged her were not gone entirely. They waited, patient and silent, hinting that the journey of the Omega Luna and the Alpha King was far from over. Serenia did not fear it. She had faced shadows before, had learned to wield her power, and had discovered that courage and love could overcome even the darkest threats. With Kaelin at her side, she knew they could face anything. Together, they were unstoppable. The castle, once a place of isolation and fear, had become a home. The halls no longer whispered threats but echoed with determination, growth, and the quiet hum of magic. The trials of the past had forged them both, and now, in the light of shared triumph, they could finally breathe. Kaelin placed a hand on Serenia's shoulder, a steady, grounding presence. "The world may still doubt you," he said, "but here in this moment you are perfect. You are mine and I am yours. Nothing else matters." Serenia smiled, her heart full, the storm of the past weeks settling into a calm certainty. "And I am proud to be yours," she whispered. The moon rose higher, casting silver light across the castle towers. The wind carried with it the faintest hint of adventure, of challenges yet to come. But for now, there was peace, victory, and the quiet certainty of love. The rejected Omega, once scorned for her curves and softness, had risen, not through beauty or conformity, but through courage, heart, and the unwavering strength of being herself. And as Kaelin and Serenia stood together, hand in hand, overlooking the vast, untamed sea, they knew that while the future might hold shadows, they would face them side by side, unstoppable and unbroken. For in a world of kings, queens, curses, and magic, they had discovered the greatest power of all, the power of love, trust, and the courage to be fully, unapologetically oneself.